Hello and welcome to the short video for Introduction to Philosophy, class number 8, summer 2024 edition. So, as usual, we'll kind of go through the announcement stuff, the content, etc. One thing that I added is ChatGPT in AI, because if you've been following like anything, AI is everywhere, in places probably where it shouldn't be. Now, there are those, of course, who claim that AI is overhyped, misused, etc. But we'll just focus on, its connection to this class. So, in general, in a sense, nothing to do with the class, but kind of connected, it's a good idea to learn a bit about the ChatGPT in particular, AI stuff in general. Again, that's vast. It's like, telling someone, hey, you should be familiar with, programming or something. But here's some resources that are very approachable. One set consists of some videos that provide a practical guide to AI, specifically the large language models, what we typically call today chatbots. There's other types as well. There's image generators like Midjourney. There are also expert systems, etc. But in the context of classes with papers, it's the chatbots, the ChatGPT, and its brethren that matter the most. If you don't already have a ChatGPT account, you can get one here for free. Also, if you have a computer, which I assume you do because you're looking at this, you can get Microsoft Edge and use Bing Chat. You can also download on your phone, and companies like Hewlett-Packard, Apple, Microsoft are busy cranking out AI PCs. Probably best not to buy one right away, but maybe the only option in the future. And there's also a guide here to the best practices for using ChatGPT. So one obvious thing is, should you use ChatGPT to write your paper? And the answer is obviously morally no. Now, what safeguards are there in place to prevent this? And the answer is basically turn it in. It can flag AI papers with some degree of accuracy. And as a practical matter, even though some people have started failing people for using, seemingly AI-generated papers, there is the question of how good the Turnitin and other programs are at spotting AI. And, with classical plagiarism, you could generally point to, a website or a person's paper and say, this definitely was copied from Wikipedia or from somebody else's paper. Though with AI, of course, it's like instant diffuse plagiarism. It literally plagiarizes from everything can get its little digital, claws into, and then generates, content from this. So essentially, it's not a matter of, aha, this came from this source directly. It's more of, this looks kind of like AI. So also, of course, people can have papers that are presumably completely honestly written. They get kind of flagged for AI. And so we're not yet at the point where it's reliable. So at this point, I don't directly fail people for having a paper that's flagged as AI because, again, I'm not sure how reliable this is. So why not just do your paper with AI? Again, ethical concern, but also the practical concern is that I found that with classes that I've been teaching since ChatGPT came out, is that by pure coincidence, by pure accident, the papers that I have, AI is like really, really bad at generating these papers. I won't explain like how it's bad because that will allow people to try to counter it. But in general, I don't have to go and fail a paper because, I suspect it's AI. The paper essentially kind of like fails itself because the AI is really bad at doing these papers so far. Could change. Maybe this will be the semester where, it can do great stuff. So as a practical thing, I'd encourage everyone to learn some things about ChatGPT because people will not shut up about AI. Everything is AI, etc., which, for good or for bad. So you definitely want to know about that stuff. If only be able to like talk about it when people start bringing it up. And also, of course, in terms of the class, there's a moral thing, don't use it to write your paper. And if someone does happen to do so, there's the risk. And again, I won't directly fail someone just because it's flagged as AI. Generally, as a warning, AI-generated papers from my classes have been pretty consistently auto-failing. They just fail themselves because they're bad. Getting back to the actual content-y stuff. So for the paper, I have the links in the modules, but also conveniently, people often ask, like, what's the paper about? And even though, of course, it's in the modules, it's way down at the bottom. So here's a direct link to the paper module. It's got all the paper stuff. Here's a direct link to the paper, walking through in painful detail exactly how to do the paper, exactly how I'll grade it. And if you're not familiar with methods of citing sources, etc., it includes some guides to that. There's also a PowerPoint for people who like clicking through PowerPoints. Here's a link to the ungraded draft. The draft is ungraded. I put a score on it so you know like what your grade would be if you turned it in, but it's ungraded. It doesn't count for you or against you. What happens if you don't do a draft? Nothing. Nothing happens at all. It will eventually like auto zero, but it's not an actual grade. There's also the plagiarism check, which is very useful. And if you have doubts about, is my paper plagiarized? Or if you want to like check out how well an AI generated paper, can full turn it in, the ungraded plagiarism checker gives you a chance to do that. I've set it up so that it doesn't obviously load the paper into the system, because then presumably you'd start, flagging yourself with plagiarism, which would be bad. And you can look at this. I don't go in and look at it. So a person could plagiarize 1,000 times in the ungraded plagiarism check. What matters is the final version. Also, again, ungraded. Doesn't count for you or against you. The first deadline for the paper is the paper +5 bonus deadline. And if you turn the paper in by this deadline, you get +5 points added onto your base score. This is the real deadline for the paper in the senses of this is when the paper should be turned in. If you miss that deadline for whatever reason, there's also the emergency deadline, which is a week later, which is for full credit. Even though it's called emergency deadline, it doesn't actually have to be an emergency, but it was intended to serve for cases where someone is working on their paper, their computer decides it's time for the AI revolution, rolls against them, they defeat their computer, but are able to finish their paper because they've destroyed their evil computer or misguided computer, or maybe good computer. They were the bad guys. So it used to be just intended for emergency cases. Someone's computer breaks down, they get sick, they have other things that they'd rather do, or other things they need to do, and the emergency deadline is no questions asked. Everyone gets a free week. The price for that, though, always a price, is that you give up the +5 bonus. You only get the +5 bonus for turning in at that time. If the paper is turned in after that, but before the emergency deadline, full credit. And then there's what I used to call the desperation deadline, but now I call it the 50% deadline. And that's at the very end of the semester. And it's a chance to turn in something to get some credit, like 50%. And that's the, oh crap, I didn't do my paper, I don't want to fail, and then turn in something. So that's the paper direct links. Here's how to write the paper. There's also in the paper module, there are, as we slowly wait for it, so there's again the guide here. There's a video about the paper draft, if you want to see that. And there's an entire video on the paper guide, which essentially just walks you through the whole paper with a PowerPoint narrative. So boring stuff. The next thing is the video is the paper word count and style. If you're not sure about what the paper word count and style should be from the guides and etc., this video addresses those questions. Here is the plagiarism check and a video for that, because lots of videos. And here's the check. Here's the draft thing. Here's where you turn in the papers. There's a +5 bonus, emergency deadline, and then the 50% deadline. And then there's some Canvas paper guide links here, which probably everyone is probably familiar with. If you've been obviously in a Canvas class before, you know how to do this, how to upload the paper, how to view comments, how to view the turn-in results. And people sometimes want to print papers from Canvas with comments. Someone requested that a few years ago. And so that's how to do it if you want to do that for some reason. So back to the announcements. So there's a paper. Also got a question, where are the documents? There's their book for the class, etc. And here are all the documents. For the book, no book to buy. As a you noted before in an earlier video, I had a choice between having people buy or not buy an expensive book of philosophy readings or have a PDF. So with the PDF. Downside is, since it's got to be free, and since I don't want to get in trouble for copyright violation, all the stuff in the readings are stuff that's in public domain or something that I have the right to reproduce. And so downside is there's not new cutting edge stuff because people who are still alive tend to like to be paid for that and generally, don't want their stuff distributed for free, which I understand completely. And so the PDF readings, complete set of the notes, all the notes from day 1 to day 0, super detailed. There's also the paper guide, which I mentioned before, and there's the syllabus for this semester for your convenience to look at or ignore as desired. For those who like PowerPoints, here are all the PowerPoints for the class available for download and viewing. And then, as always, the last announcement thing is, two more. For the content, so we continue with the discussion of God and stuff, and we have our good dead friend St. Thomas Aquinas, and he presents the classic famous 5 ways: the way of motion, the way of efficient cause, the way of possibility and necessity, the way of gradation, and lastly, the governance of the world. And these are classic a posteriori arguments for God's existence, based essentially on empirical evidence. The world is a certain way, like it moves, therefore he infers from this observation, God exists. So basically, stuff moves, God. Efficient causes, things have to be caused, God. Possibility and necessity, there's got to be a necessary being, God. Gradation, there are degrees of things, there's got to be a best thing, God. Governance of the world, this is kind of the classic argument from design. Very popular even to this day. Pretty much a standard argument for God, which is if you look at the world or look as your own hand or eye, things seem to be, too complicated, too complex. They appear to be designed. How could this all be just chance? How could I have, how could humans have evolved, these cool hands and nifty eyes by pure chance? There has to be a designer for this design, and of course, God. And then the final bit is, not surprisingly, since Aquinas wrote this stuff a long time ago and people have been debating this for centuries, there were various criticisms of the 5 ways. And not surprisingly, whenever there's criticisms, people often have the wrong thing they're criticizing. They're making mistakes in their criticisms. Sometimes these can be, innocent, sensible mistakes. Other cases, those are the ones, these aren't horrible mistakes. These are just kind of common misinterpretations without any malice behind them. So it's not like the internet. So that's the stuff for the content for Class 8. I have direct links here to the readings. You don't have to read all of this at once because this is all the readings. I didn't take them and chop them up into 24 different files. And you can go by the content specified here, and then you can go to the readings and files to directly download the readings and notes. For the work, it's quiz number 7. I know it's Class 8, but it's quiz number 7. And this one covers the background for St. Aquinas, the 5 ways, and these criticisms. So the stuff conveniently for today. And like all the quiz, you get 5 minutes to take it. It's 5 questions, true or false. And due is May 31st, but of course, the available until date is later in June. Last thing, this will be the last time I talk about attendance, because unless some people at the course after today, everyone is currently attending. So thank you for attending. So that way I don't have to worry about going to iRattler every day. Everyone's in there is attending. If you've added the class since earlier today, then let me know, do a thing in Canvas, and then I can mark you as attending. So this hopefully is the last I shall speak of attendance. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.